Welcome to Dwarven Forge Live. This is I don't know what this stream is, but this is our we're hanging out tonight with a panel talking about game design. We don't have a name for it. I don't know what number it is. I don't know what we're doing. But
it's the first of the guest streams.
Welcome to our first guest stream for our Reliquaries Kickstarter. Thank you, Chris. We could have figured that out maybe before we went live, but you know.
Yeah.
So tonight we have Hey,
there it is. There it is. Let's just get into it. Ooh.
So we're
where did you get that?
Painted.
We're joined by Daniel Kwan, Justice Arman, and B. Dave Walters. Woo! So, gentlemen, we're going to talk about who knows what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about game design, but it's going to probably be a freewheeling conversation that could end up talking about Vin Diesel's breakdancing career or early instructional video.
Or we could turn it around and say like,
I'm already tweeting about it. Yeah, it's too late.
It's like, you know what? Maybe can we just get Vin Diesel to call in? You know,
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do that.
Yeah. Apologies for starting about 2 minutes late, but there was a freewheeling discussion about MMA that then went into Vin Diesel, his twin brother. Yeah. But yeah, we couldn't stop it.
So I would just like to say sorry, not sorry. I said
no, I'm not sorry at all. I said what I
turn
said.
on the camera, and Daniel and I would just do it. But
yeah,
we were ready.
So we're
I'm serious though.
We're gonna spend roughly the next hour talking about game design. We're gonna do a giveaway at some point in the middle for a $50 to the pledge manager, right? $50 credit into the pledge manager for Reliquaries, and let's say should I show the dwarf before we start? We got it working. Miles.
Oh, yeah.
I see the hot. This is the hotness. Well, I might have to turn out all the lights.
You got it.
Camera's on.
What?
Yeah, I don't know if it'll.
Okay, let me hit the blackout.
Chaos. You're getting to see how the sausage is made right now.
You'll never eat the sausage again if you see.
We literally.
It's true. It will cure you of sausage if you knew.
Oh, yes.
So we were having a hard time getting these LEDs to work previously, and Miles finally. Oh, there we go. Now Miles finally got it to work, so that we got light in the dragon's eyes and light coming up onto the Master Smith himself. So we finally got success. Yay! And it looks really cool.
I thought you were about to tell us a spooky story.
No, I'm all out of spooky stories.
I think someone's wondering who makes the dice. This set is the prismatic glass set from Talon and Claw.
Yeah, these are ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like everywhere, no matter how you turn them, something sparkly.
I'm like, they're pretty through the camera.
They're the definition of pretty. They are pretty incarnate. So before we dive in, can you guys?
That's like Nate is pretty through the camera like that.
Let's.
I'll drink to that.
Let's get the lights back.
Can you guys give the audience your quick elevator pitch about yourselves? Who the heck are you, and why are you here?
Yeah. Who are we starting with?
Well, you.
I started talking.
Just volunteer.
Let's do it. Hey, I'm Daniel Kwan. I'm a game designer, cultural consultant, and a two-time Gold Emmy-winning podcaster. I'm one of the co-hosts of the Asians Represent podcast. Doing some cool design stuff, Motherland stuff, some other secret stuff. You'll hear about Motherlands more. And I recently did the Book of Inner Alchemy, kung fu movie from the 80s and 70s inspired adventure in Candlekeep Mysteries, amongst other things. Yeah, that's me.
All right. We're going counterclockwise. Let's go Justice. Why don't you...
I am Justice Arman. I am a full-time goblin over at Beetle and Grimm. I feel like every time I do an introduction, it's like that scene in The Office where he's like, oh, I'm so worried I'm going to say it. Just with all the NDA stuff. You might know me from the DM's Guild or MCDM's Kingdoms and Warfare or Arcadia or just some of the dope box sets we make over at B&G. I think that's good. That's good enough.
I think dope box set undersells how cool
it really does.
There's one behind me, I think.
Someone was asking about it on
no,
stream
it's gone. Never mind.
yesterday.
Yeah, they were asking us a couple days ago.
You guys do it's. You know what it is? It's you're not just making a bunch of like sparkly stuff. I mean, there's sparkly stuff, which I heart, but like you're doing it for DMs. Like you're active DMs. You clearly know what a DM needs. You're breaking out the module. You've got all the maps. You've got the cards. You have all the stuff that an active
the props.
DM needs. It's legit.
Props.
It's not just a bunch of nonsense of fluff. It's like it's a bunch of fun fluff with all the stuff you need to do it to make it even better. It's like it's the best combination of all this frosting and the real cake.
Mine are over there, so I keep looking that direction. Yeah, like the Curse Estrad and Van Richten's props come up a lot in the Black Dice Society, like a lot. So
Nora has our Taroka deck, and it is always on point.
It is an eerily accurate Taroka deck. Like I'm like when our run on this show is done, you should smudge the shit out of that Taroka deck because like there's something in there. And I'm like, not yet. Keep it going for now, but later, smudge.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
After it's over, once you've done your dark deeds to the players,
right. Yeah, when we're wrapped. Yeah, right. B. Dave Walters. I'm the stunt Justice Arman. I am the shadow to his Peter Pan. I just stand behind him and loom. You can find me all over the interwebs. Wherever fine streaming content can be located. I'm somewhere doing something. Only 5 days a week now. I'm down to 5. We're doing good. Creative director over at Demiplane and Dungeon Master for the Black Dice Society, among other things. And here in about a week, you're going to be announcing something ginormous. So stay tuned.
Woo! Where will we? Where do we see that announcement? That ginormous.
Yeah.
Announcement?
But where won't you see the announcement? No, follow me on the Tweetagrams at B. Dave Walters. That's the safest bet. I don't expect anybody to keep track of all the nonsense I do. I barely can, and I'm there for all of it. So yeah.
Content warning,
Respect.
there are a lot of painful puns on your Twitter feed. Just throw it out there.
Those are features, not bugs, Nate.
You get what you get. That's what you get.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right.
I think I described it as 30% memes, 30% games, 30% scathing political commentary. That's kind of, and then 10%, variables. Yeah.
Well, inspirational.
Just
You missed
very
it.
like it.
It's inspiring.
I try to sprinkle a soupçon of inspiration in there, just because it's tough. We got this apocalypse on, so on occasion trying to
just
remind
an
people,
apocalypse.
right? Yeah, whatever,
No big
everyone
deal.
does. Yeah, like we've been through it, but now our grandparents can't guilt us anymore. That is true. We are neck deep in said apocalypse. So yeah.
I think one of the toughest parts for me is that I have just hundreds of dollars worth of Dragon Forge in the floor down below, on the first floor of my condo, and I can't even use it.
Yep, it's true.
I can't use it. I mean, you can use Vorpal board and stuff like that.
I say Vorpal or take a picture and use it on Roll20.
But it's I just.
Yep.
It's not the same. It's not the same. But soon, I promise. Oh yeah, and I'm also lead designer of Into the Motherlands. Daniel is on that project.
I was gonna remind you.
That is true. Yeah, that's relevant. Yeah. So I've done a little bit of the old storytelling and in content writing, which is what we're here today to discuss. So
yeah.
Also, we're taking questions, y'all. So put your questions in chat with the word "question" and all in caps in front of it, so we can snip it out of there.
Boy, it's like you stream 5 times a week.
Yeah, it's like you really know what you're doing.
Like I've done this once or twice. Sorry, not trying to side seat host, Nate. Sorry.
You're the best. Yeah.
It's fine. We could use the break, honestly.
What was your peak? You were doing 30 streams a week or something. Right? What was your? You had so absurd.
I was at the height of my Patreon. I was running 30 to 35 games a week.
That's
no.
Games?
How is it possible?
It's ill-advised. It's ill-advised. Let me just put that there. And and then I was still playing in streams and doing other content too. That was rough. I don't recommend that. But yeah, that's what happened.
Were they all
that lesson
kudos
for the
to
rest
you
of us?
for taking care of yourself and paring down on those things.
Were they all at least playing the same adventures?
No.
So this stream is really going to be about how do you organize yourself?
I can speak to that with some authority. Yeah, no, it was Vampire and D&D. What's funny is when I did D&D in a castle 2 years ago, because obviously we didn't do it last year, we had to do 2 games a day, 3 days in a row, and that was just exhausting. And now that's Tuesday. I tell people, I went from a 10K runner that's now an ultra marathoner. Now the castle's coming up. I'm we're only doing 2 a day for 3 days. Oh,
Rookie
no.
numbers.
This is an actual vacation.
It's literally actually a vacation.
But I'm getting paid.
Right. Which makes it a more betterer vacation.
So before we talk about some design techniques and thoughts and whatnot, can you guys each share one of your proudest design moments, like something that you've done that you like. I want to just hype you guys up before we dive into it, so you can establish your authority of what's like. Is there something awesome that you pulled off that you're like, you know what, that was pretty cool. Go me. Or is that too hard to cheerlead yourself?
I like seeing them all individually, like one at a time. Have the same response.
Okay, I've got an answer.
Oh.
Okay, I've got an answer.
Well, this will lead us into This will lead us to our closing question of the night, which we'll be talking about imposter syndrome, because we're talking about it every time we have a guest on, because it turns out true. So.
Hey, yeah. Okay, so I think for me it was designing the gloves of soul catching. So if you go on like D&D Beyond, you search like gloves of soul catching, or just go on like a D&D forum, you'll basically find like, this item is super broken, or I really like this. It was polarizing, and I designed something polarizing, and I'm very proud of it. So really proud of the gloves of soul catchers. Now, if you don't know what they are the item that you can potentially get at the end of the Candlekeep Mysteries adventure that I wrote. Basically, in 5e D&D, they make your con 20. And if you hit with a successful unarmed strike, you can use the gloves to deal an extra 2d10 force damage, and you regain hit points equal to that force damage. So if you have flurry of blows, you are healing as you deal damage.
And just churning out damage.
Now, obviously there are caveats to it, and that's what I'm really proud of. I'm not proud of how overpowered these are, although one person very pleasantly sent me a DM saying, you designed the Holy Avenger for monks. And I was like, oh, thank you. But what I think is really neat about this is it's seeing people think about using this magic item or including it in their adventure, or seeing groups kind of debate whether or not they even want this magic item. That's the part that's really important to me, because in order to actually get this magic item, you have to sacrifice 3 people. 3 people of 3 different sort of values or virtues to even get it. So in seeing people not only say, oh, this magic item is very powerful, or hey, this magic item is very overpowered, but also you have to go to great lengths to get it. So seeing sort of narrative and mechanics kind of marry and harmonize there in a debate that happens in and out of game is something that's really important to me.
Well, it's a little lightning rod. It's an interesting thing.
Exactly.
You're creating stories, you're creating some turmoil, and man, it's an awesome, right? You throw it on a big baddie, and the story of how he had to do all this stuff to get it, and then you have to face him. There's, it's something. It's not just like a +1 sword. It's a story. It's a story in your hands, and that's exciting. Wow, he set the bar high. Who wants to?
Mine, unfortunately, is a thing that is yet to be published, but it was a format that I came upon during my Patreon, because I would publish a monthly adventure also that I was then adapted. I figured out how to write branching adventures in a way that made sense, because that is always a hard thing to do. That you're like, well, if they come to a crossroads, if they go left, this happens, but if they go right, this happens, and if you're not careful, it starts to tumultuously spiral into this web of nonsense, because then you have to be well, but if they went left, but then they went right from the left, and then it just gets out of hand. I figured out a way to keep that fairly tight and a little more conceptual, in the sense that it is if the sheriff of the Camarilla is going to basically be come with me now. If they go with the sheriff, this happens. If they resist the sheriff, this happens, and kind of having an easy way to keep it more branching and conceptual. That was something I was proud of. Yeah.
When you said that, my mind immediately went to the skill tree from Path of Exile. If any of you have ever played that video game, I was just like,
yeah, it gets out of hand quick. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, if you can find a structure to, some sort of structure that makes your narrative easier to tell, you win. That's, I'm always struggling for structure. I don't know if you've ever seen inside the Dwarven Forge Studios here, we're searching for structure.
I know that. Well, most modules are linear, and quite frankly, that's a strength, especially for newer DMs or storytellers, because once you've been at it a little while, you can adjust on the fly as necessary. because, you know, most of them are the liches in the castle. You know, here's a couple of ways into the castle, and, you know, and we'll articulate those ways. And if they do not that, you're kind of on your own. So having a little more guidance, but leave the freedom for innovation. That was I was happy to figure out how to be able to put that in print, basically.
I want to see it. I want that.
I'll send you a link when we're done.
Woo! And Justice, what do you have? Do you have a thing that you're proud of?
I'd say the thing that I'm most proud of, I can't yet talk about.
Of course.
So I'll give you a couple that I can. One was one of the earliest things I put out there, which was a supplement on Infernal Contracts that now has sold almost 5,000 copies, which is really hard to do on the DM's Guild. That there's always going to be a sense of pride that comes from being paid for creative work, something that, like, you know, growing up, my parents were like, that's not an option, go find something with security. No, you can't go into theater or whatever. And to come full circle and have that, you know, be my career now is really, it's always really humbling. The other thing would be this super awesome CR29 time dragon I got to do for Kingdoms and Warfare. It is the biggest, scariest creature in that book, and it melds planes and the multiverse into a single universe. So it basically comes, eats things, eats entire worlds, and then they just mix and churn, and it's utter chaos. But her breath weapon just exhales different pieces of planes. So if she just like wrecked an angelic plane, like radiant columns just fly out with her breath weapon, and it's really cool.
It's a Galactus dragon.
Basically,
Dragon. I was literally thinking Galactodragon.
Yeah. Well, it's basically Galactus Dragon. I think she's actually purple, so yeah, it's kind of fitting.
The cool thing about your contracts supplement was, it's not a module, it's not a thing. It's like you found this really neat little area that's fun to develop, and I think that I met you right around when you'd released that or something. Our first conversation was talking about Infernal Contracts. Bless you. Maybe it was right after that, but you sent it to me. We were talking about Infernal Contracts at Gen Con. It was this was our first discussion I remember. And I was asking you about a blind devil, what they do on a contract. You're like, well, clearly they would put Braille on there, a secret clause that no one would see, that they would get locked into, and it was brilliant.
Hide it within the textures.
Yeah.
Of the contract.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's super cool, and I think designing like niche stuff is a lot of fun. I think, you know, this hobby has been around for over 40 years now, so it's finding a way to turn something on its head or present it in a different way. I mean, there's like a supplement on the DM's Guild that's all about locks and doors, and it's an awesome supplement, but it's something you just never really think about. And then when you look it up, you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, locks and doors. It's like, that could be a whole thing. And so finding something new with everything that I write is important.
Well, it's giving people different toolboxes, right? Here's a toolbox on contracts. Here's a toolbox on doors. Here's a toolbox on whatever. And there's lots of toolboxes about here's another monster, here's another item, but this is like toolbox and something different is exciting. So when it comes to designing, so my first big question for you guys is, like, you know, when you're designing for your home game, there's no stakes, and this, you know, if the session goes off the rails, you have a week before the next one to figure it out, and, you know, you can change it and whatever. But when you're designing something that's published, that's out there, like, you have to have the whole kit and caboodle down and kind of have enough way to get it back on track when it goes off track. How do you tackle the sort of the difference of writing the home game thing, which is free, versus writing something that has to be published and make sense to people and have enough guardrails to, like, keep it working?
No, please.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. No, I went first before.
It probably goes without saying that playtesting helps a lot with that. Especially, you have to let someone playtest it that you don't participate in. You just observe. Because I think that's a mistake a lot of times people make with anything that you're writing or anything that you're creating. When you give it to a person for feedback and they're like, well, I have these questions, and you answer the questions, that's actually bad.
That's not
you won't be sitting next to the person that purchased it and be like, well, what I meant was blank. You know, like it has to stand on its own. Although, believe it or not, I would submit there is not, at least for me, there is not a significant difference between how I plan or design for a home game versus how I plan or design for a stream or a published product.
Me too.
In that, an example I always give was in the early 2000s when Vince McMahon finally bought WCW, bought his rival, and he owned all the wrestling at the time. And I watched an interview with Vince, and they said, well, you won. You don't have any more competition. And he said, yes, I do. My competition is literally everything else a person could be doing. They could go for a walk. They could go to dinner with their friends. They could watch a movie. They could watch football. I still have to do something that is going to make a person stop what they're doing and consume my content. And this is the same way with your home games. I try to be very respectful of people's time. And if you find you're having trouble scheduling your games, that's your problem. I mean, life happens. Life happens. People have to work late. Somebody gets sick, can't get a babysitter. But if you're consistently having trouble booking, it is because you are not delivering an experience consistently that is worth them stopping what they're doing to participate in it. So trying to be sensitive to people's time, I still try and give it my all in that respect. It's just obviously when you're there real time, you can be a little more agile, but I think it's just, you just try and give the best possible beginning, middle, and end. And like I said, I try and, give a couple options in my printed stuff. But I mean, I know of games that go on right now that there is a long running Star Wars game and just a text goes out like the day of that it's like, we're playing Star Wars tonight, and it's first come, first serve, and everybody just pounces on it to try and get into the game because the game is great. When you have that, you won't have any trouble getting people to pay attention.
I mean, on top of that, I think I would also add that, it's also important to not only present something that people want to consume, but also surround yourself with people who share your values and want to play with each other, right? Because the game could be super engaging, but if I don't like another player at that table, right, I'm not going to be there, right? So it's like the thing about home games that's really great is you have a lot of control over who sits at the table with you. Yep. Right. And at the same time, you kick them out, right? And if it's like one person who just can't schedule, maybe pull them aside and be like, hey, you know what? It's kind of, we got some tension here, right? At the same time, I think, we're talking about adventure design. But one thing that I think people don't talk about enough is you really got to collaborate with people at the table. Hey, what are you interested in? I've got these plans, right? But in order to keep people engaged and keep people coming, they need to feel like they have some ownership over what's going on. People don't, I mean, there are certainly people, especially those who are new to the game, who kind of like being told, okay, what happens next? Where are we going? What am I doing? But for those who, maybe watch a lot of streams, Into the Motherlands, Black Dice Society, shout out. Right? And they see
I'm like, what?
They see these veteran storytellers and people who have this rapport, or watch a Critical Role, and they see the incredible rapport that they have with one another. They want to replicate that. And how can that be replicated? Well, if you kind of have agency over what happens or what may happen.
It's their story.
So for me, it's their story too, right? It's not just your story. It's so many GMs get caught up in no, this is my story. This has to happen. And that also can result in people not wanting to come to your table or not return.
Well, if you have no agency as a player, if the things you're doing don't affect the story and the narrative, why are you playing? The whole fun of it is to see where it goes.
There's a give and take. It goes both ways, right? Players got to grab on. If the DM is trying to indicate that, hey, maybe you should go talk to this person, go talk to this person. But if a player's like, oh, maybe I'm interested in this thing, maybe maybe gauge when it's the correct time to indicate your interest, or step back when another person is kind of having their moment.
Yeah, it's just a plus one to that. Not every table is for every player, and not every player is for every table, and that's okay. You do need an understanding of what's the story you're here to tell, because to your second point, it is a collaborative art. It is a game. It is a story you are telling together. Yeah. And this is an inheritance from older versions of the game. There's some OGs. There's some OGs that we all know, actually, that the game used to be very adversarial. The game was the DM versus the players, and you try and survive. The game's not that anymore. On some
tables it is.
Some tables it still is.
Yeah, but I'm not there for those tables. No. Not there for that. Also, hardcore deja vu all of a sudden. That's it. So apparently, all of this has happened before and will happen again. So let me just say that there. Yeah.
What about you, Justice? When you're designing for published material versus designing for home game, like do you have a different approach? Is there...
Yeah, B-Dave mentioned the playtesting. I think that's super important. I think when I'm setting up to write for my player, I know my players really well, and I DM for a one shot or a short campaign every once in a while, but for the most part, I'm with the same home game when I'm not doing something in the industry. It's kind of this own kind of private, nice, safe space that I can go. That's not work. That's just enjoyable. And not that work isn't enjoyable, but
funny when you have to define D&D, not work D&D versus the work.
Right, yeah. But I think that it's the idea of designing situations when writing, like situations versus stories. Like I think you can get more of a narrative experience with a home game when you have more time. You get to craft. You see week after week. You can adjust things and go where the players want to go and seed things and respond to them. Whereas with this adventure, once it's out in the world, it is what it is. And GMs are going to take that and they're going to do the same thing you would do with somebody else's and adapt it to their table. So, there are linear adventures, but yeah, like B-Dave said, branching adventures or adventures that, set up these situations where the theme is really strong, where there are obvious narratives running through it, but that it's not necessarily this happens, then this happens, then this has to happen. Because you get done with that and you're like, did I just watch a movie? And some players love being part of a D&D movie, and others want more choice. And so I think designing situations of, here's what's happening, these giant, you go to like Storm King's Thunder, all of these situations stem from giants wrecking house throughout the Forgotten Realms, which is no matter what problem you're solving, that theme of these giants being out of control goes back to it every time, even though the players get to choose where they're going to go, how they solve that. At the end of the day, when they finish the encounter, the thing they get out of it is, oh my gosh, these giants are out of control. We need to do something about this. Even though you didn't say, here's what happens, here's who tells you this, that sort of thing. And so, with my home game, I know where a story is going. After a week, I can tell and I can plan and I can rewrite, but I can't do that for other people.
Situations, not stories, is probably the best design advice ever. We had Amy Vorpal on. I was gonna say this a couple of weeks ago, but it was like probably when was it? I don't know, 6 weeks ago,
like a month and a half,
2 months ago, whatever. She was talking about writing. She did one of the adventures in Candlekeep, and she said Chris Perkins, his first piece of advice to her said, don't write stories because you don't know what your protagonists are going to do. It's that same, right? Situations, not stories, is probably the best. Right? Present your players in situations, and they'll write the story.
Yeah,
is really a great one.
I will notice something that WotC's been doing a lot more in D&D stuff of late that I really enjoy, like in Witchlight While Beyond the Witchlight, is they've started including a lot more character background. Into the point, a lot of things that it's like, I don't even know how you could fit into the story, but at least now you've got it. Mr. Witch and Mr. Light's whole life. So if the players really dive deep in their interactions, you're prepared, or it can inform your performance of them and how they'll react, which I think is a really useful thing. I like that.
It's a toolbox, right? It's
a toolbox. I prefer that style.
Yeah. It is a little weird in the design now because there's times now that you got 2 or 3 places with the same NPC where it's like, here's an important thing when you meet them, then here's an important thing later in their stat block, then here way in the back is role-playing notes. But I mean, I get there's no perfect way because you also can't have like, well, let's deviate for 5 pages with stuff you may never need. So I get it.
So I've got two really different examples. Like there's an advantage to the format that Wizards has established with D&D, right? You go from, you basically have you got the backstory and there's like your motivations and then there's the hook, right? And there's some sort of threat, there are stakes, and then there is a perception of a reward at the end, right? Because that is always fluid. And then as you are developing the plot, you have these scenes that are literally just there as development scenes, right? You have these narrative beats that you want to hit. And then there are encounters, right? Anything that basically hinders progression. So, you know, we're on a Dwarven Forge stream, so you've got your beautiful layout, honestly, still the dream. You got your beautiful layout, you've got your magnetized like traps and all that really cool stuff, right? Those are encounters. But one thing that I think people forget, and Justice, you kind of talked about this, is that encounters are not just times when you roll your clickety-clackety math rocks. It's not just for math rock throwing, right? Encounters are also opportunities to reveal lore.
Yes.
And I think that's why having all of this backstory in, like, you know, Witchlight is really important. I wanted to highlight something, what probably one of my favorite products, RPG products out there, and it's a system agnostic one. And it's called Kidnap the Archpriest. You can find it on like Drive Through RPG. Kidnap the Archpriest is basically, it's by an author named Skirples. It is a sandbox adventure where you are basically, there's all these NPCs, but they don't have stats. It's like, this is their voice, this is their demeanor, this is their morality, this is how they dress, this is how they speak, right? Because a lot of people get anxiety over like what their characters sound like.
But no stats.
No stats, because you can adapt this to any system.
Awesome.
Right? And then it says, okay, this is the city that you have to go to, and the Archpriest is in this sort of big castle at the northern part of the city. And you have this much time to go get them. How will you do it? Where will you go? And the module gives you a 24-hour schedule for all of the key NPCs, where they're going, who they're entangled with.
That sounds really cool.
It's super
that
cool.
does.
Right? So that's one thing that I really love.
And it's wildly open-ended. It's just like, here's the
wildly
thing you need to
open-ended.
do. Here's
Like,
the
I had-
timeline. Here's the sandbox. Go. And just
like
play.
I have run Kidnap the Archpriest at least 5 times, and it has never been the same. Right? Some people will they discover that the innkeeper, who generally ends up being the contact of the rogue in the group, well, the innkeeper's wife is having an affair with this guy who delivers candles to the chapel. And then they discover all of these things. It's really neat.
You know, this is different, but I have to give a shout out in terms of branching narratives that are never the same twice. Alice is Missing.
Oh, yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Alice is Missing is incredible. It's a little chunky on the setup. I mean, I played it with the guy who wrote it, and we were still like an hour and a half on setup, and it was like, I mean, okay, I guess
But
at
it's
some
worth
point,
it.
at some point we're gonna do something. Yeah. By the end of it, all of us,
But Alice is Missing is a perfect example of the ultra collaborative storytelling, right? And Kidnap the Archpriest, likewise. It's just like, well, how do we want to do this? It takes that sort of, that sort of the wargaming side of things. Like, we need to strategize. We need to be tactical about our social interactions. Another one that I really like is, I love the idea of the mega dungeon.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the mega dungeon. But at a level beyond the mega dungeon, I like the idea of the mega dungeon actually not being subterranean, but being an enclosed environment, a town with a castle that you can go back and forth between as you discover more and more. And so another one that I always recommend folks is, it's called Castle Shintalin. There are very minimal stats, but it's very, very much system agnostic, like Kidnap the Archpriest. Castle Shintalin is really cool because it presents you not only with a village with key townsfolk and shops, but a mega dungeon of a castle.
Nice.
And I've run this over the course of 2 months with the autism program that I run. And what I thought was really neat is that the players ended up developing relationships with certain NPCs in the town who they would lean on for advice on what to do with this haunted castle. And then that way you can really get a sense of, okay, well, what do my players want? How do I keep them engaged? When is it time to push them out of the village and back to the castle? And when is it time to tell them, okay, maybe you've gone a little too far? So I'm a huge fan of sandboxes, but sandboxes are, difficult to write, right? Because they lack direction, right? But I love them for my home games, and I love them as a tool. and as a sort of a structure in my mind, right? For me, I always say and I'll ask this to all three of you, and Chris, our producer on the back end.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, how you doing?
If you have, I always use this example when I'm like doing panels and speaking at cons, but it's like, an early GM, like a new GM, basically develops a scenario where the players have to cross a bridge, and this bridge goes over a river, and on the other side of the bridge is a forest, right? And in the GM's mind, they've written out all the flavor text and the encounters that'll happen in the forest. And as they get to this clearing at the center of the forest, there will be this like tower, right? And then they planned out everything there. But what happens when your players are like, I don't want to cross the bridge, right? And then people freeze up, right? And I'm sure that a lot of folks who are tuning in or just getting into adventure writing, right?
I'd have thoughts on
I ask
this,
the rest of you,
but
like, what do you do when the players don't want to cross that bridge?
I definitely have thoughts, but I want Justice to talk because I've been soaking up all the oxygen over here.
Yeah, I don't know.
And how do you write that? That's two questions.
Come
So what
to
do you
my
do
mind.
in a home game, and how do you write it?
Yeah. So there's two things that come to my mind. One, and we've talked about these big hardcovers too. The idea, there's a 2002 article in the DM Experience that Chris Perkins wrote called "The Invisible Railroad," and it's the idea of winding back up where you would have been without the characters really understanding that they chose something different. That rather than the characters knowing that there's this tower on the other end, they just know that there's a bridge, and giving them options, giving them empowerment to their choices, that they don't want to cross that bridge. Maybe they want to sail down the river. Maybe they want to turn around. Eventually, they come to this forest or to somewhere else where this tower has moved. The world has changed around them, and they don't realize it. And that's where they're going. Yeah, the other thought of me is some cases where it's setting expectations. It's if you've had a session 0 and you're going to do a mega dungeon, and it's that castle in the town, and people go, we really don't feel like going into the castle. It's like there was a miscommunication there, and it's you.
Yep.
We've signed up for a different game. Yeah, like we talked about this tower. This is the tower. Everything I've written is with this tower, and you knew about the tower. You're gonna have to go in the tower. Like, I know that sucks to feel like you don't have the choice, but you also got to think about your GM and how much work goes into planning, and how much, like, there's going to be choice there for you. I think about this time. I love surveying my players. We have a session 0 actually after this stream where I have some questions that I'll ask them before they go into it. And it was, we had finished a campaign and we're continuing it all the way to level 20. Woo. And I asked them all kinds of questions about, like, how did they feel like some of these parts went, what were their favorite moments, and what kind of adventure they wanted to play. And so I asked them 3 questions, and my survey was poorly worded. So I had 3 questions. One was, I want linear, which is I want to be part of a D&D movie. And then I had malleable, like I want choices, but I am okay following a general path forward. And then I had sandbox. It was like, I want choices, and I want those choices to matter. And that's where I messed up. I worded that question to where the others sounded bad. And what I found was,
of course you want your choices to matter. Like, that's the only choice to
right, everybody wants choices to matter. So they chose the 3rd one, and I wrote a sandbox section for them. And there was so much stuff they could do. And they're like, where are we supposed to go? I'm like, you're not supposed to go anywhere. You go wherever you want. You want your characters need to have, motivations, and here's that's happening. They're like, but which one of these things are we supposed to go do? And I'm like, none of them. And the next time I surveyed them, I changed that question. They were like, we want linear or we want malleable. We hate sandboxes. Sandboxes, there was too much going on. We didn't know. We had choice paralysis, and it wasn't what they wanted. So that's a very long-winded way of answering your question, but I hope a couple of those points answered it. And I'd like to hear from B-Dave now.
What?
Well, 2 things. 1, I just ordered Kidnap the Archpriest. 2, yeah,
Nice.
it's on Drive Through RPG.
And there's rules in Kidnap the Archpriest for adapting it to science fiction.
So,
Ooh.
just random aside, since we were talking about the UFC earlier, the founder of Drive Through RPG is a guy named Steve Wick, who's almost my size, and we trained in Kung Fu together. He was a 3rd-degree black belt. when I was just starting, and I got the brakes beat off me regularly by Steve Wick just because we were the same size. Eventually, I got in there where I was sticking back a couple times, you know, but not at first.
So you get a discount on Drive-Thru RPG now?
So hand to God, I would come home and I'd have big bruises on both of my shoulders, and I'd have 4 lines down both sides. And my girlfriend was like, "The hell happened to you?" And what it would be is he would lunge forward and grab me, and I didn't know anything about grappling, so I would just pull back, and it'd be the scratch, and that would be it. Boom. Every week, I'd come home looking like a tiger. Quite frankly, I loved it.
That's cool.
That's neither here nor there. You know, I think a couple of things. And here is my dirtiest trick as a dungeon master that some of my characters have caught on to, some of my players, rather. I know there's certain times that through the next door is the dragon.
Yep. You
can go left, you can go right, you're about to fight a dragon. If you split the group and you go left and right, you're about to fight 2 dragons. You know? if there is times that the narrative requires a certain thing, the narrative just requires that thing. But I also think you shouldn't stress too terribly much if it's like, here's the entrance to the mega dungeon, but you know, you've met a delightful agoraphobic kobold NPC outside, and they really want to take some time to interact with that PC or that NPC. That's okay. That's not a loss, as long as they're happy and they're engaged. And if they completely are like, no, we don't want to go in the mega dungeon, it's like, okay, as you're trying to leave, something's gonna happen where maybe like the villagers or someone you loved have been kidnapped and taken into the mega dungeon. And if you're still like, no, okay, we're gonna play the game and it's gonna go where it goes, but somewhere along the way, somewhere down the line, you're gonna go underground, and you know what's underground? The mega dungeon. You think you're over in Philadelphia, but you know, where you didn't go into the dungeon in Denver, but those maps are going to bear a striking resemblance to one another because you did one and not the other. So, I mean, I think that flexibility and the ability to yes and your players, like I'll tell you, for me, even when I'm streaming, I carefully script the beginning. I know exactly how it starts and exactly what I'm going to say. I know where I want to be roughly by the half, and I know where I want to be roughly by the end. But I don't plan the second half of an adventure at all. Because both the dice and the players will surprise and betray you. I'm just kind of like, but I also, when I'm, at least for streaming, you know, this is a slightly different thing, but it works just as well for a home game, especially like Justice was talking about, where people don't necessarily know. This is a thing that Jason Carl does for us that I also do on the Black Dice Society now. He will give us like written breakdowns of things that get very specific into our characters and our motivations. Me with the BDS, I'll just be like, hey, check this out. This is going to be a relatively light episode. You know, this is more going to be more narrative. If you want some character moments, this is the time to do that, because next week's going to be a meat grinder, you know, or something like someone's going to come talk to you. Let them finish before you kill them. Jason says that to us quite a bit, actually. Like, let them talk before you jump them. Or like, hey, do go towards the mountains. Don't go towards the ocean. Like, you don't have to spoil the story, but at least you can let the people know which way the wind's blowing, so everybody's rowing in the same direction. That has been tremendously useful. And then that will also help you dodge some of those problems where if you're like, hey, today's session, you should be entering the mega dungeon. So when you lay it all out, that it's like, oh, okay, now's when I enter the dungeon, you know, and that helps a lot.
I just built this entire mega dungeon. Please let me use this terrain. Please.
So I have a next question related to all of this to you guys. So if you're trying to deliver an experience that's worth everybody's time, as B Dave was saying, or you're crafting the situation, not a story, where do you start? Like, where do you know, as you've got this blank slate, you've got this award, like, where do you start to create the situation that's going to be engaging to your players, that's going to get them to say, oh man, I want to spend 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is with these? Like, where do you start?
Want to hear from Justice?
I usually start with the villain. I think that at least for our table, where the heroic triumph, the mystery of hunting down the villain, like, I know now before we've even had our first session for this campaign, which villain I'd like to place before them. I did a short poll on Twitter of which type of creature it would be. I got a surprising answer for it, and I'm very excited because it led to one of the coolest creatures I think I've ever made with some help of some people in my trusted secret discords.
You have a whole secret Discord?
Yeah, secret designer discords. I'm just like, hey, what if this? What if this? And somebody's like, but what? Yeah, I'll tell you about it. Like, you just wait like a month. But the idea of I go back to like early videos that I used to watch from Matt Colville, where he talks about like the core to any NPC is what do they want and how do they get it. Like that. If you know those two things, you can run any NPC. Everything else is just makes them better. And that's like we talk about Witchlight. That's one thing that you see all the way throughout Witchlight is every NPC wants something. They're fun to play because a lot of their backstory stuff is kind of superficial, which can sometimes, you know, if they latch onto somebody, be negative. But if they're superficial and it's kind of like a Bond villain, where you know the Bond villains because they each have a shtick, they're very memorable because of that superficiality. But starting with the villain and knowing what does the villain want today and how is the villain going to get it, seeds a lot of that. And then I think one thing that runs adjacent to this, especially in my home game, that I don't see talked about a lot in the design world is the power of foreshadowing in adventure writing and in games of seeding something very early to make the payoff bigger down the road. That like I have a whole adventure set up that I know the first 2 levels of this are going to be this adventure to get the first bit of this villain. And that villain is probably going to take shape around like level 3 or 4. But I know that by the time they see this level, this villain, they will have already known some information about them. And it's just going to blow their mind because all these little breadcrumbs they've seen in seemingly unrelated adventures just come together. And they're like, oh my gosh, we've known about this the whole time. It's that aha moment that your players get that you never want to rob them of, that you want them to solve it, that makes it so rewarding. So I always start with the villain, usually, unless I'm doing something weird.
They think you're a really clever DM when they figure it out and you seeded this thing in forever. They're like, wait, you did this like.
Well, I mean, even better, they think that they're clever players.
Yeah.
And they've solved it before it happens. And it's like, yeah, you knew this was coming, but it might be a little different than you expected.
But if you can set your players up to feel clever, you win, right? You're giving them a situation to shine, to feel clever, to figure stuff out, like giving them enough bit that they can solve it. It's like, it's the best.
If I was doing a different genre, it might be different. But yeah, B-Dave, sorry.
No, excuse me, I interrupted you. I apologize. Yeah, it has to be simultaneously surprising but inevitable. I can tell you, in 2 weeks is the season finale of Black Dice Society. It will be episode 30. I'm going to pay off something I set in motion in episode 1. In episode 2, I foreshadowed the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Like, I mean, there's actually a lot of nods to upcoming product releases all through these stories. I tell people, if you go back and you watch this, especially in like a year or 2, you'll be like, oh! I'm like, yeah, I know. That's intentional. To everything Justice said, I think this is just a general, again, this is general storytelling. Like, for me, I write for film, television, comic books, graphic novels, you know, TTRPGs in novels, short stories. So my career is kind of unusual that I get to exist in all these different arenas when most people, you know, only get 1 or maybe 2. And there really are things that are transcendent. And a lot of that are things like these characterizations. We got to remember things like the villain is the hero of their story.
Yes.
You know, what the villain is doing makes total sense to them and from their point of view. And the more relatable their point of view is, the better. That's why you have a character like Killmonger from Black Panther, who's right about everything. But also Magneto, who is additionally right about everything. Yeah. That you're like, we have to stop you. Not sure why, but we need to stop you because you're making a lot of sense. I will say something about making memorable NPCs also is if you just include just an adjective to the NPCs. It is not just the dwarven bartender, it's the itchy dwarven bartender. He's scratching constantly. You know, just something like that. That little thing will make them remember the itchy bartender when there's 1,000 dwarves and 1,000 gnomes. Like I mentioned before, the agoraphobic kobold. You know, you put any 2 things together and it will make it live so much. I would say from where I start with the story, I start with the theme, and the theme is what the story's about. What's it about? Like, people make the mistake often of being like, well, it's a heist. Well, the heist is what happens. Yeah. The heist isn't what it's about. You know, like what's the thing that you're trying to say, the statement you're trying to say, the thing your characters are supposed to take away from this? Is it the triumph of good over evil? Is it, you know, the burden of immortality? Is it just, I mean, sometimes just blunt force heroism. We're just here to do the right thing and, you know, good will win the day. That's all fine. You know, because how I designed the Black Dice Society as a long form, ongoing horror story is much different than something else I'm working on that is going to be a much shorter run, but is overtly comedic, but not nearly as much as you would think, because comedy is just tragedy plus time. But because to me, when I know the point I'm trying to make, then everything else is born out of that. Like, we just did D&D Celebration, where Justice mentioned earlier about, you know, finding new ways to do things. There is a big push to find new ways to play D&D. And that was one of the things we were challenged, like, you know, show us something we've never seen before. So I came up with my story where they're all monsters on a revenge heist mission. And even though the episode is hilarious, it's Deborah Ann Wall, Todd Stashwick, Pat Rothfuss, Alicia Marie, and Matthew Lillard, and it is just bananas from start to finish. And please watch it if you haven't seen it, because they are all magnificent. But what I was getting at underneath all that is it was a question about morality. Like, these are overtly monsters, and there's a dragon that had its hoard stolen. And, you know, you think about that, all of us have killed countless dragons and took their stuff. But the moment a dragon's like, hey, give me my stuff back, you know, you're like, oh, wow, I guess that is the problem. Yeah,
You know, kicked down the door to my house and took all my stuff and killed my wife. And like, yeah.
Exactly. You know, are the heroes so good? Are the monsters so bad? You know, that was the theme. That's what the story was about. And everything else grew out of that. So that's where I started.
They always ask what the Dragon Hoards, not why the Dragon Hoards.
Yes. Exactly, not why.
These are heirlooms, because the dragon has lived for centuries, and this is just all of their stuff.
Mm-hmm. So where do you?
I wrote it actually. It's really funny. It's actually really funny. Like, I always start with a theme as well, because like I can't develop a villain if I don't have a theme, right? If I don't have, for me, because of like my academic background, like I was an archaeologist before I kind of embarked on another career. And for me, I always like to draw from my background, because I want to make sure that I make use of my education. But I always like to start with theme, because, you know, if I know that, okay, my home game, it's actually set in like a fantasy China. But if my players don't want to do that, if that's something they're not interested in, well, I can't make a villain that way, right? We'll see what we want to do there. It's really funny when you think about like morality. I actually wrote, one of the first things I ever wrote, was like a while ago, was an adventure for a kids tabletop RPG called Flip Tales. And the adventure is basically about this goblin king who is threatening a village with war. And the players arrive at the village, and the village is like, oh, we need you to help us, because this goblin is going to try to attack us. And so the players are encouraged to go meet with the goblin with the, you know, intentions of, hey, maybe we're just going to go kill all the goblins. When they go, they find that the goblin's entire village has been raided by a party of adventurers. And the story is actually about hunting down a group of player characters who have just stolen from this goblin. And the goblin is simply just retaliating. So yeah, I really like to start with like a theme. What is it going to be? Do we want to have something grand? Do we want to have something that dives into morality? Do we want something fun? Do we want just the classic, let's go kill a dragon? Let's go chase this monster across this vast landscape and help people along the way. A piece of advice, though, when you're starting to plan something, it's really cool to think, like, I've got this awesome villain, I've got this theme, we're going to explore this sort of stuff. But understand that if you as a GM can only maintain and create very good, you know, only a handful of story threads, don't feel pressured to create this vast meta narrative, if that's something that will disrupt your ability, to have fun, if that's too stressful, simply don't do it, right? Set boundaries for, what you can do, what you can deliver, and let your players know, and also know what their boundaries are.
And
it's super important.
Doing one thread or two threads really well is a lot better than having 7 mediocre story threads.
Yeah,
that are going.
Exactly.
Here's something I got to point out, which is a major pet peeve of mine. I find people, especially when they're starting out, they're homebrewing their world, they're like, I wrote 5,000 years of backstory of the War of the Gods. I'm like, great, no one cares. No one cares. No one cares about your genealogy of the royals. No one cares. They want to get into the world and find out what that world is and have it emerge there. The best example I always give, for 1,000 generations, the Jedi were the peacekeepers of the Old Republic. That's it. That's all you get. That's all you need. Thousands of hours of content have been spawned out of that. If J.R.R. Tolkien had wrote the Silmarillion before The Hobbit, none of us would know that man's name. Let them get in there, let them feel the world, and then it emerges out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and let them tell it. Don't have this secret backstory and all this stuff that no one ever learns. There's this all the time and LARPing. All the time, people write these elaborate secret backstories that they never tell anybody. You go to all these events and thing, and they're walking around with secret backstory, but they've got like 20 pages of stuff written that they never tell anybody because it's their secret thing. I'm like, well, why do you have it? Like, you're supposed to be sharing this story with people. Don't write the secret stuff that nobody hears. Like, write the stuff that has value that that your players can interact with.
Yeah, and I think that goes like to adventure writing. Is like, I've seen a lot of modules where there's someone with a secret backstory and no tools for the DM to
actually use it.
It's like, you have a secret. You're a secret member of the Zentarium. You don't have a letter in your desk that you're writing to somebody. You don't have a signet ring or like anything. Well, no one will ever figure out that information. Your character may as well be just the commoner because you've written nothing into the module for me to display that. And what you've done is you've given your DM work. If they want to use that, they have to find out how to seed it to them. And it can be frustrating when you're trying to coordinate everything else. I
always assumed that the villain was supposed to rattle out those 2 pages of exposition as they were dying.
Yeah. or when they capture the PCs, they rattle it out and then gives the PCs time to get out.
Yeah.
So
I think there are a lot of like examples of good of media where the world building comes out through the story, and I think those are my favorite ones. Or like, I don't know, like early Game of Thrones, where you start to learn about factions as they operate, rather than, you don't have to have read the book. You see how they act, you see what they say, you watch the decisions that they make, and slowly you understand them. If you've read the book, like, it's that much richer for you, but you don't want to give your players a book going in. I think most of the campaigns I've ever... Right, yeah. But my first DM gave me a 20-page thing. I read 3 pages of that, and his world building was awesome. He didn't need to give us anything. It came up at the table.
Well, let's do a giveaway. Justice, give us a secret word.
Ooh.
I mean, it's not gonna be a secret anymore because now people are gonna use it. But
let's do reliquary. Is that right?
Reliquary.
This is what happens when I learn everything through writing.
Hey, but that's a great thing, though, right?
Yeah. See?
People learn differently.
We're doing reliquary.
B-Dave has posted that on Twitter at least once. If somebody mispronounces something, it means they learned it through reading.
You learned it from reading.
Yeah.
It's true. It comes up every week on Champions of Lore that we're like, here's these words that have lived in our heads for decades, and it's like, I have never said this out loud, like Sawakin,
Yeah.
Especially fantasy nonsense. Like, it's a bunch of consonants all strung together. Like, I don't know.
All right, so we're doing a giveaway for $50 in the Pledge Manager for our Reliquaries Kickstarter that is going right now. Anybody is eligible, no matter where you live. It's not Reliquaries for the word; it's Reliquary. A bunch of you are getting it right. Just if you wrote the plural, go ahead and just write the single, just to be safe. As these come in, do we want to go through some of the questions that we've?
One more question first before we take questions from the audience, which is the one I ask. Well, I've got 2 that I ask everybody. We'll start with this one first. What do you guys? What's your DM prep techniques? Right, I am perpetually trying to improve my DM prep, and we have a lot of DMs who watch. Like, if you were gonna have one piece of advice for DM prep, aside from read Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, what would you? What's your piece of advice?
Oof.
Justice?
I would say just in a pinch. Well, this is just a general thing. Just always yes and them, and something that is good for getting the players immersed in the story. It just asking them, you tell me. You come into a spooky room. You tell me what it looks like. You know, you see a man and he looks, he looks heartbroken. Tell me what he looks like. You know, bring them into it as well. You don't have to just like carry all this yourself. Remember, it's a story you're telling together. And to Justice's previous point, you know your people. If you know them, you know what they like. Everybody needs at least one chance every session to shine. Everybody needs a chance to be a rock star. The fighty person needs to get to fight. The talky person needs to get to talk. The sneaky person needs to get to sneak. You know, like the skill monkey needs a chance to skill monkey. By the time you're like, here's the core needs of the humans at the table, and you've driven those posts in the ground, there's probably not a lot more you have to do to weave that together. Especially when it's like, here's what you guys need, and here's what the villain's trying to accomplish, and boom, here we are.
That was a good bundle of advice.
Yeah, I mean, like, everybody's gonna, prepare differently, right? Like, everybody's gonna, some people will prepare, like, love their notebooks. Some people love their digital tools. Some people got the World Anvil, the OneNote, whatever. Like, use whatever technology works for you. But I think that the big thing is, like B. Dave said, like, you have to make sure that everybody at the table, yourself included, so important. Because a lot of people think, I'm GMing, I am providing a service. No, you're also playing the game. You are playing the game. Remember that.
How do you give yourself a moment to shine as a dungeon master?
Having that conversation with the players and being like, hey, you know what, like, I've got this cool thing I'm really excited about. We each have, like, talked individually and as a group. I've incorporated a lot of what, you brought to me into this story. I'm excited to tell it. And setting the expectation that, hey, I've prepared some things. I want to give you folks the freedom to do what you want. But please understand that I've also prepared this. So let me do my thing too.
Don't chase that squirrel. Go to the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I think that's a big one. It's like setting the key to prepping for a game is, having everyone at the table, at the same fundamental understanding of what is going to happen. That said, if you're like an over prepper, and we've talked about like, oh, I set up all of this stuff, or I wrote out all of these characters, or I have all this lore. Just because you don't use it at that one session doesn't mean it's not going to come back in the future.
Oh yeah, recycle everything.
Right, recycle and be prepared for that. Don't be bummed out if like, oh, I planned out this encounter. Just save it for when they're at a higher level. Get joy out of editing and reiterating upon something that you don't use or something that you use and doesn't work out. So yeah, that's my piece of advice.
What are you, Justice? Any prep advice?
Yeah, I like what B. Dave said about using the characters. I think one of the first things I do, I take out and I like to use OneNote a lot, but I take out a sheet of paper. First thing I do is write out the characters' names and make sure there's an element for each of them. Okay. And then I write out what has to happen. One thing needs to happen in the session to move it forward. Even if if I know it's a shopping session, shopping can be what has to happen. They need to buy something, or they need to, they need to get from here to here. And then knowing that, I kind of go bullet by bullet, and I have things that I'd love to add. I run very immersive games. And I know that one of the last things I do will be, drawing maps ahead of time if I can. If it's a really big set piece moment, I build in an hour to put together a build for my Dwarven Forge to make that moment feel really cool when I drop it out. Or music. A lot of characters have themes or things like that. But I think
your villains have a theme when they
theme song.
They walk
the villain.
Yeah,
the villain has a theme every time, and I think that goes back to foreshadowing. It's like, oh, you see something that belongs to the villain, I play the theme, and then by the time the villain comes out, that theme has already been tied. It makes it harder to do online.
Music.
Yeah, I mean, it's harder to do that online because you get into
Tabletop audio.
Yeah, tabletop audio, but even like streams, like copyright issues with songs I like to play at our table here. But I think the big thing that I have tried and advice of my own that's hard to take is to slow down and let it and end early. Like there's so many times where I feel like, oh my gosh, we have to get here before the session is done. And if you take longer, like B. Dave said, very respectful of your players' times. Like the longer you take, they're going to be tired. The payoff moment is going to be at a low energy time. You're going to second guess yourself afterwards. But if you end early before they go into the boss's room, before the dragon is on the other side of that door, not only do you get a chance to make that a more epic moment next week, but you leave them excited for the next time. So like end early instead of ending late.
Cliffhangers.
Yeah.
They're your friend.
See the dragon, you don't get to pull your sword out yet till next week.
Yeah.
Yep.
They will show up. You're not going to have a hard time scheduling that session.
Right, yeah. They'll be like, oh, we got to kick this thing's ass. Let's go.
Yeah.
Or just like, hey, you know what? Like, I got this thing planned, but it's really late, and I don't think it's going to take 10 minutes.
No.
I want to, you know, I want this encounter to go a little bit longer. And they go,
Yeah. One of the best feelings is when like the players all go, you know, see y'all next week, you know, that sort of thing. That's like the best sound.
Let's roll this giveaway, and then we'll take some questions from the chat.
Awesome. All right. Rolling giveaway. Rom.
Oh, I know Rom.
Rom, congrats.
Congrats.
Go back the Kickstarter.
You spelled reliquaries correctly.
Reliquary.
Singular. See, I wouldn't have won.
I have others. I'm only showing the singular reliquary.
Is that the Eldritch one? That's the Eldritch one?
Yeah.
Yes.
We figured that would be up his alley.
Turns out.
True.
Super awesome.
So what
The
are
dwarf one is my favorite. I feel like it's so
incredible.
basic.
The
To do.
dwarf one is so cool, though, because it's just like...
I posted pictures of all the ones I've got. They're all incredible. But I do like this. I like this big chunky girl.
Oh yeah.
I like that you've gendered it too. Definitely.
I mean, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, no. She feels like a she to me. You know, your mileage may vary.
So what do we? What's the chat have? We got panel experts. What are the questions we have for them?
I thought this one seemed very appropriately fit to the people we have at the, at the table. Yeah, at the table. Frozen Fidget wants to know. They're running a horror campaign, which I think some of you might have experience with. I want to find magic items specific to my characters, but I have no means of understanding the balance issues that magic items bring. How do I find items that are relevant without breaking my game?
Do they have to be balanced? Sorry, that's my immediate answer.
It's a good question.
It's a good question.
So here's the thing about horror, because I've done a little bit of this now. Horror is about tension. That is why things like humor in inappropriately timed humor and asides, and that's what she says and stuff, are the death knell of humor. You can insert up moments. You have to insert up moments because the human nervous system can only maintain a peak emotional state for about 25 to 35 minutes, depending the individual. You cannot laugh for an hour. You cannot cry for an hour. You physically can't do it. You will just level out. So waving that up and down is important, but you want to avoid too many moments of levity. If you're rolling around with things like Holy Avengers and stuff like that, it is harder to feel the tension because they feel more capable. There's always a bigger fish, but keep them on their heels as long as possible. High-level storytelling, level 20 is my niche, and I started the Black Dice Society at level 1 for this very reason, and they level very slowly. So in a thing like this, I would say less is more. Whatever normal weapons or magic items you would consider balanced in a campaign, go one down from that. Like if you would have been giving them wondrous items or artifacts, give them rare. If you would have been giving them rare, give them uncommon. You know, like pull it down some. They should always feel out of their depth. And if they get something that is just really fantastic, just hit them with something that is that much worse, that new Holy Avenger kind of doesn't matter because here's a multi-headed Draco Lich Hydra abomination. Roll initiative. Yeah.
I also like the idea of, if you're, if you want to kind of make up your own thing, it's often nice to see, what that player's interested in, right? If you have I have a player who's playing, I hope she isn't watching this stream. I have a player who is a ranger, and I've kind of been like leading up to this big sort of moment where her character is going to be reunited with her uncle who she's seeking, and I've been slowly dropping these breadcrumbs. And she's going to get the bow of one of the gods in my world. And they're going to be like a sub. They're going to be. This is a big deal. They're going to be like a sub level 10 sort of character. Maybe by that point, we'll see. But the thing is, like, if you're going to give someone a magic item that has narrative importance, which is we don't have a lot of context there. Are you just giving them a magic item for loot, or is this something with narrative importance? There will be drawbacks, right? Yes. Maybe you'll have this bow, but unworthy arrows burst into flame when knocked on the bow, and you have to then craft these arrows and find the right one, and therefore these arrows will be cherished.
The Unworthy Arrow would be such a dope book title. No one can have that. That's mine now.
Yeah, that's me. Hey, I said that. I said that.
He beat me to it. Yeah, but you know it was good.
Let's co-author that. Let's co-author.
Okay, done.
You're being hunted by the followers of the god or whatever. There's all sorts of fun drawbacks you can have for that.
Right. So like you gotta, you get the bow, but you don't have the arrows. But when you finally get the arrow, when are you gonna use it?
Yeah.
Right. And yes, that may introduce, paralysis in decision making, but when they ultimately make that decision, you will make them know, they will know that it's the right one because you're going to make it absolutely bonkers. It's going to be so cool. That said, you could also introduce things that have drawbacks, right? Like the one thing that I like to talk about is like magic should be dangerous and feel dangerous. So if you give someone a magic item that's very powerful, well, there are consequences to using it. Right? If we're talking about that Holy Avenger, you're walking around with this Holy Avenger. I think, how many Holy Avengers are there? People trying to steal it from you now? Things like that. So when you're deciding on what you want to give your players, think about whether or not it's going to be loot or whether or not it has narrative importance. If it has narrative importance, attach stakes to it. Treat that magic item like a plot hook in the future. Yes. That little teaser, like B-Dave said, that will come out, in the next season. Right. Think about it that way.
Yeah, Justice, do you have any magic items?
Yeah. I think that's awesome. So I had three small thoughts. One is that like I love Adventure Time, and if you look at Finn's swords, magically, like Finn's swords, they're pretty normal, but they're epic swords. Like they have so much flavor around them. There's like the grass sword that forms from a blade of grass. You have like one that has the soul of a demon in it. So like those are probably just +1 swords in D&D, but they're really epic. They're memorable, and you can still give a kind of restricted, more conservative item that still feels epic. Instead of just giving the +1 sword, give them the +1 sword that has the soul of a demon in it, and then kind of with that, you can grow that item. Like one of the coolest things from Critical Role are those vestiges of divergence. Like you could give them an item that they don't know is a vestige that slowly grows with them. Like, yeah, if it ends up underpowered, maybe they do something that unlocks a new element of that item. They're more fond of it and it's more powerful. There's a lot of video games where you get something low level and it feels very powerful at the time, and then over time it becomes really regular. Like you get the shotgun and there's usually like 2 bullets for it, and then by the time you're like 10th level or whatever, shotguns bullets are dropping from every single enemy you fight. So you can also take the route of like, yeah, something's powerful based on how much you supply it. I mean, if you have a weapon that needs to use some sort of consumable resource, as a GM, you can test the water on that item, and then if it works out, supply them with a lot more of that resource to kind of, or eventually just remove the resource altogether. It upgrades it or something like that. And then I want to add, like, totally agree with B-Dave on that. With horror specifically, you want the odds stacked against them more often than not, because it's so critical to horror. You
can also tweak, if it's your home game, if something feels overpowered, surprise them with the thing that you gave them a wand of fireballs that are using all the time. Now it's the monster that absorbs fire and gets stronger, and suddenly their go-to thing is now causing it to be twice as bad, and it gets lively.
I will say, and I apologize, I know we're getting close on time and have more questions, so I should stop monologuing about this, but these are the kind of things I think and talk about at length a lot. You also have to be mindful of the game. I think it's heavily implied this person's playing Dungeons and Dragons. You know, even though Ravenloft is horror and Outbreak Undead is horror, Ravenloft horror is still D&D. So they still need a chance to cast Magic Missile. You know, they still need a chance to roll initiative and do D&D stuff in the midst of everything being terrible. In a way, you have a game like Outbreak where the fact it's like you got 4 bullets and 2 arrows sucks. Figure it out. You know? Yeah. Yep. So.
Yep.
What else we have from chat?
We actually have a question from Ram. When do you know that it's time for a big reveal?
I don't know if you do.
Yeah.
See, I was just about to say you'll know, and that's not very helpful.
You'll know.
Yeah.
You know, I think a big reveal is really great if you find that, say, like, the energy of the game may be decreasing when you feel like, hey, maybe I need to inject a little bit, something new into this story to kind of bring people in. Because, you know, we talked about having people, you know, want to come to the table.
Yeah.
You know, that big reveal is something that can help you there. So it's that boost. We were talking about Vin Diesel. It's that you hit that nitro.
Mm-hmm.
I love you brought it back to Vin Diesel.
Diesel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'd say
it
also.
never truly leaves Vin Diesel.
Yeah, I don't know. Vin Diesel. That breakdancing video is amazing and will forever be saved as my bookmark.
It's my gift to you, brother. My gift to you.
Yeah. Also, shout out. I know Ram. He is awesome. I would say you want to queue it up. Like I wouldn't drop the coolest thing that you've been planning unless you've given it a little bit of support, because you want that moment to you kind of want to tee it up, in that if you know the villain is around the corner, you don't just throw it at them. You want to drop 1, maybe 2 breadcrumbs, or if you know it's been a long line, then drop it. But I think it's one of those things that you have to read the energy of your table, and it's one of those weird, ambiguous, abstract things.
When you know, you know.
You know, yeah.
Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. He told me you betrayed and murdered him. No, I'm your father. Ba, 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 ba. You know what I mean? Like that's
No.
not true.
Possible.
Yeah. Hey, way to go on the practicals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I watched that with Grayson when he was 7, my oldest son, and watching him watch that revelation, like it was unbelievable. It blew his mind. He's like, he's lying. You can't be. Like he was Luke for a moment. It was the coolest thing ever. Like,
I've shared Vin Diesel with you. One of my favorite genre of content on YouTube is little kids watching that reveal. There's hundreds of videos of little kids watching Darth Vader tell Luke Skywalker that he's his father and watching their little minds be blown.
I had that recently,
amazing,
but with my partner, and I was like, you know, we've been watching anime, and I was like, okay, we're gonna watch Naruto.
Oh God.
When we get to the part when Gaara fights Rock Lee. You're just gonna pay attention and just love it.
That's brutal.
And she's watching it right now. She's watching Naruto right now. This is like 2 months ago, and she's already like 18 seasons in. Because you had that moment, that special moment that brings you in.
That is like one of my favorite moments of all time on that show. It's so
good,
cool.
so cool.
God, they set up
Do we have
so
any other
many
questions?
cool. They set up so many cool coming of age stuff in that, in the tuning exams.
Oh my God, yeah. This just turned into the Naruto stream now.
Vin Diesel stream.
We'll have to schedule one of those too, I think.
Do we have any more questions from our
We
wonderful
do. Hoppy Hippo is wondering, how do you personally push past writer's block as a DM when you're coming up with hooks for your adventure?
Whew, we should have started with that.
We should have started with that. That's a whole other stream.
That's another thing. I will just tell you super quick. Start by asking yourself what wouldn't happen. What wouldn't happen? what wouldn't the bad guy do? You know, what because this is a tool. Even with any time you have to make a decision, even if you can't figure out what you want for dinner, you know, like if you and your partner, like, what do you want? I don't know. What do you want? What do you not want? Because everybody always knows. It's like, I don't want Italian. Okay, well now that's off the list. I don't want chicken. Okay, that's off the list. As you start removing things, it helps you figure out what the thing is, and then you can catch that hook and move on with it.
Huh.
That's a way too simple of an explanation. There's way more to it. Yep.
I also just keep like a notepad or a book or my phone handy. So if I get like a cool idea, I'll like write it down, and I just have like a running list of things, and then you can kind of piece them together.
Same. Yeah, externalize your writer's block so that you have stuff saved up to combat it.
A little an archive to dig through.
Exactly.
The Mike Shea approach is write out 10 possible things, and after you get through 5 or 6, you got through the obvious ones. It's like those, you know, the 8th, 9th, 10th, you start stretching and getting to some like interesting space because you're like, well,
also,
I ran out of the obvious ones. Where do I go? And then you find something lively.
Also, like look to other things out there. Like if you're having writer's block when it comes to like this like fantasy thing you're writing, maybe just like dive into some sci-fi.
Yeah.
Right. Or explore other things. There's this tool that I use called the Magical Thought Provoker, and it's from the Patreon of this creator on YouTube called Miscast Mini and Miscast Rain, and it's basically a random word generator. And if I have writer's block, I'll occasionally like open it up and turn it on and say like, okay, what words is this thing gonna spit out at me? And I'll try to like pull something out of it.
Does it work?
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah, I just pulled it up right there, and it gave me 5 words: treacherous, mentalism, seek, metal, and bloodshed. And then do something with it.
Yeah.
It seems like those are instructions. Seek
These are
bloodshed,
instructions.
metal.
Yeah,
Well, that's the note the players find, and they're like, "What does this mean?"
That's the note, right?
Oh, I
It's
love
pretty
that.
sweet.
Do we have any others before?
We got one last question.
Yes.
IME202 is wondering. We talked earlier about, you know, what happens when your players don't want to make choices. She's wondering what you do when your players are adamant on picking a fight that they really shouldn't be picking.
Ooh.
Like say if they're
They'll
provoking.
find out, then why?
They're gonna find out. Yep.
They're gonna find out. Hands. That's it. Like, look, we swear.
PG-13. You know, no f-bombs. Yeah.
Oh yeah, talk shit, get hit.
Yeah, man.
You had that queued up.
The scientific method is effing around and finding out. Yeah. I run into this a lot, especially, I mean, just, it's the trench coat katana guy players. You know what I mean? That it's like, I don't care if there's the prince of the city, whatever. And I'm all like, well, he's got celerity 7 in your stake now. Yeah. Anybody else got something to say? No?
Well,
We're
also,
good?
you could
Awesome.
also use that as an opportunity to progress the plot, right?
Yep.
If you had this thing banked, right? Maybe they pick a fight with someone. Well, you just got your butt kicked, but you've discovered something new about this world. In my game, actually, this is something that I talked about with one of my players, and he was like, "I want my character, who is an unrefined Dampier monk, to find a martial arts master." But he's kind of playing his character in a way where he's got this like he's brute forcing everything. He's like early career Francis Ngannou, just like sending everyone to the shadow realm, right?
Yeah. Speak my language again.
He needs to find his trainer, and well, how do you do that? You take a tough loss. You run into Stipe Miocic.
One of my all-time favorite kung fu movies is Shaolin versus Lama, and that's literally the plot of it. He's just beating everybody until he runs across this Shaolin monk and just gets rinsed. And it's like, oh no.
oh no, I'm missing something. And then well, now you've just discovered something new about this world. Well, in this land, there are these martial arts masters, and they may not look like what you believe them to look like. So there are opportunities, right? Failure is just as interesting as success.
Yes.
And most games also have a fail state beyond death. You know, Vampire's got torpor. You know, D&D's got death saves and then you're stabilized. I mean, I just was running a session 0 where some people, they swarmed this mind flayer, and I was gonna let them get it down if they got it down, but they couldn't beat it. And it was like plan B, mind blast, pow! I just dropped them all. And so then they which should have been a TPK, but then they woke up in a cell. You know, they're being prepared for the slave trade now. But they learned an important lesson about, like, well, you know, pick your battles a little better, you know, so we'll see. Yep.
It's a good learning
Punish
experience.
them, but don't necessarily punish them permanently.
Punish them in a way that develops the plot.
Narrative
That shouldn't be
the
a
narrative.
setback.
Yeah, moves the narrative.
I guess. Oh, yeah,
oh yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I guess, like, kind of keeping that concept of, like, failing forward in mind.
Yes.
Like things go bad, but you can turn that into a way to make things better in the future.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe even, like, you could probably even change the perception of there aren't people you're not, supposed to, but you can fight anyone, like, but who's behind that person? If they kill a low-level NPC that's really important, they might be on the run from the law, they might invoke, like, that might be a lieutenant of someone bigger who is just absolutely pissed at that, like.
I'm gonna tell you 2 stories from LA by Night. One, in the episode where Victor became Baron, I went to Jason at the break and I was like, if we kill Abrams, will it mess up the story? And he's like, I don't know if you can kill Abrams. I'm like, that is not what I asked. If we kill Abrams, will it mess up the story? And he's like, no. It so happens I ended up just blackmailing him to become Baron, and we didn't have to kill him. And when we killed the sheriff, that just changed the trajectory of the whole entire story. I mean, Alex just rolled catastrophically well. For people that don't know Vampire, he rolled 12 successes with a crit, which is the equivalent of essentially rolling 3 20s, and they were all 20s, more or less, and took the dude's head off. And it just changed the entire narrative, which is fine too. You know, that's fine too. You never know. But I will say this, even though, yes, we're saying, you know, show them where they exist in the world, advance the story, but don't punish them if they pull a Hail Mary and win. Don't punish them if they find a way. You know, just roll with it. Yes, and.
Or find an interesting way to punish them if they pick a fight that they can't win. Don't just kill them outright. Do some sort of interesting narrative consequence that leads to something.
You're still there to tell the story together.
Yeah. You might make a really cool villain in that moment. Like, when they lose, nothing makes a player mad like losing to a villain. Like, you just got your villain there, at least a low-level one.
Totally.
Birth of a supervillain.
So, closing question for all of you guys, which I sort of ask every guest that comes on this show, is pretty much every creative that we've ever talked with has some variation of self-doubt or imposter syndrome or whatever you want to call it. You know, there's wrestling with all of this stuff. How do you wrestle with whatever creative resistance is holding you back from, you know, putting out your best output?
Well, let me say, because my answer's simple. I don't ever. I famously have no concept of imposter syndrome. I've worked too damn hard for all of this. Which I'm like, that's my 2 things that I try and point out to people. One,
do you ever have doubt, though? Do you ever go, man, is this no good, or is this in my word? No.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, because I know anything that I think is dope right now, in 5 years, I'll read it and be like, that was adorable. He was really trying his hardest, you know?
You were trying.
Yeah, it's a sliding scale of
really tried.
You know? I say always be mindful of the effort that you've exerted to get to this point, the sacrifices you've made, because they exist. You know, the times you didn't go out, the times you know, maybe took the lower paying gig, that you stayed up late, you know, all the effort you've exerted. And also remember that, there is a just supreme amount of luck and chance that are involved in all of this. You know, there are some extremely talented people whose name you will never know. There are just some garbage people that the fates aligned in such a way that they got their time. So, you know, stand in a place of gratitude if you're getting to do this. And the third thing I would say, if you have done anything in the direction in the creative arena that you are trying to do, if you got paid to write a story, if you contributed to a thing, if you're a singer and somebody tossed you $50 to sing at a wedding, if you've been compensated ever Well, you've done it. You're a professional now.
Yep.
The rest of it is just a question of scale. You don't have to weigh yourself against, the type of things that I do or the type of things we do or Mercer or Bree or anything. If your art is being introduced into the world and human beings are consuming it, you have already won, because everybody's got that story that only you can tell, the song that only you can sing. And by holding it back, you are actively harming the world. We are in the darkest timeline right now. Somebody somewhere needs your story. The 8-year-old version of you, the little kid who has the same fears and doubts that you have, is looking for you right now. And if you're holding that back because I don't know if it's good enough, man, you're actively hindering humanity. Let it out. The worst thing you write is better than the best thing you did not write. Just shoot your shot, keep moving, do better the next time.
So we need to record that and keep that on a loop. And anytime you have something like that, you just
Somebody
hit
put that, 'cause
play.
I need to, that needs to be my alarm in the morning.
Good morning. I'm ready. Let's do it. Go.
I'm ready.
You call
BA
me-
told me to go get it.
Call me anytime. I'll tell it to you again. Yes.
My daily
If
affirmation is just
somebody-
that clip.
If somebody clips that, tag me in it. Yes.
Please,
Right.
please, I would like a link to that too. I'm dead serious.
Clip it.
Right.
What are you, Daniel or Justice? Do you guys have any advice on tackling self-doubt?
You know what? It's I was actually thinking about this a lot recently, because a lot of the stuff that I put out, is has elements of my heritage in it, and folks like me, or children of the diaspora, struggle with this a lot when they try to write about their culture or incorporate elements of their culture, because they don't feel like they are an authentic cultural voice or an expert. And this is something that, I have to deal with all the time. But, for me, you have to believe in, your journey. You have to believe in what you're putting out. There was, because, there's no point in working hard if you don't actually believe in your effort, right? So if you're working hard and you're starting to experience that self-doubt, well, you're devaluing all of that effort that you're putting into it. You know who said that? Mike Guy. That's right, of the Hidden Leaf. But seriously though, if you're working hard at something and you're doubting yourself, revisit why you're doing this. Are you trying to tell a story? Are you trying to put something out there? Are you trying to break into the industry? Right? Just think about the reason why you're doing something, and then forget about that self-doubt and just keep working, right? For me, I had no intention of ever writing for TTRPGs. I didn't think it was possible. I didn't think it was possible for, someone who looks like me to write for Wizards of the Coast. And I said, screw it. And I just went for it. I shot my shot. And it made it happen, right? Woo. Still doubt myself, but I'm still going to keep shooting my shot, right? I don't know if that made any sense.
Yeah.
B-Dave,
And that brings me to a follow-up question.
I'm with it. No.
But before
I
the
agree all
follow-up
of
question,
it.
Justice, do you have any insight on self-doubt?
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps to know that you're not alone. A lot of people struggle with this. This hits me all the time. I would say, echoing what both Daniel and B-Dave said, don't discount those late nights, that hard work you put in. You have put in the work, and there is an element of luck in everything. And if you feel like that element of luck was significant for you, you can give back. You can help someone else along. You can hold the door open when you get there, so that somebody else who's working that same late night, somebody else who isn't represented in this hobby, that you can let them in, and they'll do the same for somebody else, and slowly but surely real change will happen.
Give that luck meaning. Meaning.
Yeah, don't pull the letter up behind you, which is part of the reason why, if you've been following me on Twitter, I've been hyping Harley so much. Follow Harley at Harley Hero. She's great. She's she's blowing up now. Follow her.
Playing in a
She's
charity
the
game
timeline.
tomorrow for Extra Life.
Playing in a charity game with you tomorrow for Extra
Yeah.
Life. And also Joshua Simmons, Mackenzie. Wait, who am I forgetting?
Kenzie J. Armas, Raph, Dr. B from
Dr. B, that's what I was forgetting.
And then Dustin and Devin it's on the D4 channel.
I'll say one other thing about this like, you know, self-doubt. You know, a lot of this sort of self-doubt and imposter syndrome also comes from this scarcity mindset that so many people have in this industry. They're like, this person is already doing this thing, so I couldn't possibly. And that's where that imposter syndrome comes from, right? Like, there will always be space for you to do something. There will always be space for you to create something. So we have to get over this scarcity mindset. We need to start uplifting each other, right? There can't be just one person doing this thing, right? Because that's not how we push this medium forward.
So, sorry, go be Dave, and then.
I was yes-anding. That's it. So,
Daniel, you said I didn't think someone that looked like me could write for Wizards, which is, that's probably, I don't know what to say to it, but other than it hits you. There's been a lot of gatekeeping in life, but in gaming in particular, whatever. And it's hard for me to talk about it as like a straight white guy. But my question for you guys is not, is it getting better? Is it changing? But like, how as a community, how can we continue to make it get better? How can, gaming should be for everybody, right? As Word and Forge, we believe everybody deserves a seat at the table and should be open and inclusive. How do we, as a community, how can we keep pushing to a place so that the the 8-year-old that's thinking about writing now doesn't say, someone like me couldn't write for Wizards of the Coast. Like, how do we get to that place?
I mean, I think we all said an answer already, right? It's, not kicking that ladder out, right? It's, shouting out someone, being excited about your peers, being excited about what they're doing, giving opportunities to others. But at the same time, it's also not being afraid to put something out there, right? Because, if you put something out there, it's your first thing, and one person vibes with it. And that one person is like, you know what? Yes, I can do that, right? You've already made the space better, right? At the same time, it's like not also realizing, so the thing with Asians Represent is that, like, we are the first Asian people to ever win any award for podcasting.
Wow.
Ever. And we're now the first Asian people to ever win twice in a row, right?
Hey.
But that doesn't make us the only Asian people in this space. That doesn't make us the only Asian platform, right? That kind of thinking is so important, because once you let go of this selfish thinking of, I can be the only Asian expert, I'm the only Asian person, and you start thinking, oh, there need to be as many people who look like me as possible in this space. And I'm going to use my platform to uplift not only people who look like me, but other marginalized people as well, right? And I think that's that's where I think that, the industry is getting a lot better, right? Streams like this are happening. Questions, Nate, like the one you just asked, are getting asked, right? That in and of itself is huge, because people don't want to talk about it. Right?
This is another one that is literally its own
This
topic.
is also another stream.
Talked about it.
He could not go through that door.
No, of course.
The short answer is it is improving. It is improving. Again, I got to give you the super TLDR here that, my career exists in no small part of I was vocally critical of Chult when Tomb of Annihilation came out. And I was like, this is just very tone deaf. I can tell it was not mean. It's just no brown person read this. And to WotC's eternal credit in general, and Greg Tito's in particular, he's like, you know what? You're right. And brought in people like me and Tanya DePass and Gabe and Daniel and, all sorts of people to just have more voices. Because what you said is, and I've talked and written about all this extensively. It's there is, in fact, room at the table for everyone. And your projects are improved by that. And that's what we're doing with Motherlands. Like, Daniel's working on Motherlands. It's an Afrocentric story, but we still wanted his voice to be a part of the project. And that was something we ran into because, Ouagadou just finished, had funded right before us. There's a few other things coming. And people were like, well, but there's already Afrocentric sci-fi out there, and it's like there seems to be no shortage of white dudes with swords and sandals and castles and medieval Europe stories. So stack up the Black future people stories, stack them to the roof. You know, yeah. It's just, and the last thing I will say is, vote with your wallet. I think sometimes I can't even get into the institutionalized marginalization and tokenism that so many of us endured in these spaces. We're gonna have to do that later. But I think a lot of times there are these purity tests that right before Black Panther came out, there was a movement. It didn't work, thankfully. The people were like, we should boycott this movie because they didn't film it in Africa. And I was like, no, do not do that. That is not the lesson Hollywood will take from this, that we should have made it blacker. That is not what will happen. It so happens the movie was great and it went where it went.
It's the best Marvel movie.
If somebody's even moving in the direction that you're going, if they're making content that is headed towards your North Star, support it. Because the more successful things are, the more things will be. The fact that Motherlands had a huge Kickstarter makes it just that much easier for the next project that is like ours to come along, to kind of glide through our slipstream. So yeah, you're gonna have to have us back for that one, man. But I do think it is getting better.
I want Justice to be able to answer as well, but I will say something on top of what B. Dave said. I also got my start because I was loud. I was very critical of Oriental Adventures. I read through the whole thing live and dissected the whole thing live. It's bad. But that said, if you're going to be loud and you're going to be critical, you also have to talk about how you can move past these things. It's one thing to say, this is bad. You also need to say, this is bad, here's something better. Right?
Here's how
if there isn't something better, here's my thing that's better.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, you all have basically said all the things I would. I mean, I'm going to echo support with your wallet too. I'd say and also don't wait for other people to support to retweet that person who, don't wait for, some big person in this industry to retweet them or to shout out that person. Like get in early, be one of the first people to notice the creators who are trying their damnedest to get noticed in the first place. If you see it and it already has this person's post already has 800 likes on it, are you supporting them because it's right or because it's popular at that point? So find the people who are undiscovered, get their name out there, and eventually they'll thank you for it, but also pay them like Ram in the chat. Ram is an Iranian creator living in the States who is writing his first adventure now. And I know that when that adventure comes out, go out there and buy Ram's adventure, because I know he's working really hard on it. And go see it, and go pay for it and
send me that
review
link.
it and leave a review and tell other people about it. If you're a journalist, when you shout out a creator, link their social so that they can get other people go and hear them speak and hear their expertise and can follow them and get them some notoriety and help them establish themselves. But
that retweet,
I can't say much more than what you two have already said. So
the retweet's such an easy one, right? If you can amplify someone's signal that's not getting amplified, it's free.
It'll mean so much to them.
Such a
It'll mean
simple
so
thing
much
to
them.
do.
And it's literally boop, and you're done. Nobody's gonna say, I can't believe so and so is clouding my feed with this POC creator. They're gonna be like, oh, this person's awesome, I'll retweet that too.
Yeah.
I mean,
and again,
they might, but then screw those people.
Screw those people. Yeah, so nobody that
you
has
don't
a
need to be
valid
around.
it's also a filter for people.
Get them
who are
out.
okay.
Yep.
You figure out
I mean, that's how you change.
Is
Is show that voice that is not the right opinion. And it wasn't ever the right opinion. Is mute that person, filter them out.
Yeah, curate your sphere and keep boosting the good ones. So speaking of socials, where can people follow you guys if they want to hear more?
Daniel H. Kwan. Just go to my Twitter. Find everything from there. Daniel H. KWAN.
Boom.
Justice Arman. Arman.
And I'm at B. Dave Walters everywhere. And my DMs are open, so if you have questions, you can ask me about any of this stuff. Don't try and start any smoke. I will rinse you. But besides that, if you just want a dialogue, yeah, it's I'm available. Yeah.
Likewise.
That's amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out and wandering around. It's a variety of awesome topics here. Hopefully, our viewers walked away with a bunch of actionable advice. Or if nothing else, just enjoyed us talking about Vin Diesel for an hour and 45 minutes.
Is that what the whole conversation was about?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's true.
We summed up
In
as
spirit,
Vin Diesel.
yeah.
It started there and it ended there. Awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for everybody for tuning in and hanging out with us. And we will be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah.
It's daylight savings time, right? It happens tonight, so
Are we
Wait,
losing or gaining an hour?
Wait, are we losing time?
I don't know. We're
That's fine.
falling back.
We hitting the time warp?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Again.
Uh,
So
Oh yeah, that's
3 o'clock
yeah.
tomorrow with
2 a.m.
Eldritch.
tonight. Yeah.
We'll be looking at the Eldritch reliquaries that B. Dave was holding up there. We're gonna dive into Eldritch, and then Monday we're back with 2 more streams, and
yeah.
on we go.
Monday we're looking at the Artificer
Woo!
reliquaries at 11 in the morning, and then at 6 that evening
Magic.
we're having a Magic the Gathering stream with Becca Scott and Michael Sinclair and Jimmy Wong.
Should be fun.
Hey.
Yeah.
Jimmy Wong!
Yeah.
Trailblazer.
We're we're debating whether or not we want to make them actually play Commander.
Oh yeah, we're challenging them on the air.
on stream.
Playing Commander with Jimmy, that's on like it's a dream.
That's yeah. Well, they have to do it if you do it on stream, right? They have to say yes. That's how it works.
True. I just shot something with Jimmy and Josh this week that you'll see soon. So there you go.
Is it
Are you
secret?
gonna be
Is it
on the
part of your
command
mega
zone?
reveal or a different secret mega reveal?
Oh, that's so effing cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody. This is let's wrap this up, and we'll be back tomorrow. And thank you again to our amazing guests, Daniel,
All right.
Justice,
I'm
Peter.
just
and
gonna
Jason.
wave
Guys,
until
thank
I'm
you.
told we're off.
Thank you
Yeah.
for having us. Bye.
Anytime. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
everybody.